The sound of her sobbing cut through the night air like a knife. Mark paused, grocery bags hanging heavy from his calloused hands, torn between walking away and stepping closer. He'd learned the hard way that other people's problems could become your own all too quickly. But something in her broken cries reminded him of himself, alone on his bathroom floor 3 years ago when his wife's goodbye letter shattered his world. Before he realized what he was doing, he was already moving toward the woman hunched on the park bench, unaware that the next few minutes would alter the course of both their lives forever. If you've ever felt that life has beaten you down beyond recovery, this story might just change your perspective. Like, subscribe, and join me on this journey of how a chance encounter between two broken souls created something beautiful from the ashes of their pain. Mark Jenkins hadn't planned on becoming a single father at 34. The construction worker's hands were built for framing houses, not braiding his daughter Lily's hair before school. But life rarely follows our plans. 3 years ago, his wife Diane had left them both, claiming she wasn't cut out for motherhood, in a hastily written note. No warning, no discussion, just empty closets and the crushing weight of raising their 6-year-old daughter alone. Tonight had been particularly rough. The refrigerator was making that worrying clicking sound again, his boss had cut his hours for the 3rd week in a row, and Lily's teacher had called about her falling asleep in class. Mark had dropped his daughter at his elderly neighbor Mrs. Wilson's apartment for an hour while he grabbed groceries with the last $20 in his checking account. The weight of his failures pressed down on his shoulders with each step back toward their apartment building. That's when he heard it, soft, desperate crying coming from the small neighborhood park he passed every day. Most evenings, he would have hurried past, eyes forward, mind focused on the million problems waiting at home. But tonight, something made him stop. The woman sat hunched on a bench beneath the park's single streetlight, her dark hair falling forward to hide her face. Her shoulders shook with each sob, and even from several feet away, Mark could see she was clutching something tightly against her chest. "Excuse me," Mark said softly, setting his grocery bags on the ground. "Are you all right?" The woman's head snapped up, eyes wide with alarm. She quickly wiped at her face, though the tears continued to fall. "I'm fine," she said automatically, her voice cracking. "Just having a moment. Please, go about your night." Mark should have nodded and continued home. Lily was waiting. The milk would warm. He had his own problems. But the woman's eyes, red-rimmed and swollen, held such profound despair that he couldn't make himself walk away. "I'm Mark," he said, keeping a respectful distance. "And I know what fine looks like." "That's not it." A bitter laugh escaped her lips. "That obvious, huh?" She shifted slightly, and Mark realized what she was holding, a photograph in a simple wooden frame, the glass smudged with fingerprints and tears. "I'm Claire," she said after a moment. "And no, I'm not all right. Today would have been my daughter's 8th birthday." The word "would" hung in the air between them, heavy with meaning. Mark felt his chest tighten. "I'm sorry," he said, the inadequacy of the words burning his throat. "I can't imagine." "Leukemia," Claire said, turning the frame so he could see the smiling face of a little girl with her mother's dark hair and a gap-toothed grin. "She fought for 2 years. The doctors said they'd never seen a child with such spirit." Her voice broke. "She died 6 months ago, and I still come to this park every night because it was her favorite place." Mark's mind flashed to Lily, to her skinned knees and midnight fevers, to the terror that gripped him whenever she climbed too high or ran too fast. The thought of losing her was unbearable. "I have a daughter," he said quietly. "She's 9. Claire nodded, a sad smile touching her lips. "Treasure every moment. Even the hard ones." "I'm trying," Mark admitted. "Her mom left us 3 years ago. It's just been the 2 of us since then. Some days I feel like I'm failing her at every turn." "You're here," Claire said simply. "You stayed. That's more than some parents manage." The words hit Mark with unexpected force. He'd spent so long focusing on what he couldn't provide for Lily, the nicer clothes, the dance lessons she wanted, the stable two-parent home, that he'd overlooked the most fundamental truth: he had stayed. He showed up, every day, despite the exhaustion and uncertainty. "Would you like to see her?" Mark found himself asking, pulling out his phone to show Claire a recent photo of Lily at the school science fair, proudly displaying her project on butterflies. Claire's face softened as she looked at the picture. "She has your smile," she observed. "She looks happy." "She is, mostly," Mark said. "But she struggles too. Kids at school tease her about her mom leaving. She asks questions I don't know how to answer." Claire was quiet for a moment, tracing her finger over her own daughter's photograph. "After Emma was diagnosed, I quit my job to care for her. I was a kindergarten teacher," she said. "I loved it. Working with children was my calling. But now, the thought of returning to a classroom full of healthy children while my own is gone." She shook her head. "I can't do it." "What will you do instead?" Mark asked. Claire shrugged. "I don't know. I've been living off savings and my parents' help. But I need to find something soon. The bills don't stop just because your heart is broken." Mark nodded, all too familiar with that reality. "What else did you love about teaching?" "Helping children find their strengths," Claire said without hesitation. "Watching them light up when they finally understand something that had been confusing them. Being the safe place they could come to when the world felt too big." As she spoke, her tears slowed, and her voice grew stronger. Mark recognized the transformation, the momentary relief that comes from remembering your purpose. "My daughter needs help with reading," Mark said suddenly. "Her teacher thinks she might have dyslexia, but the waiting list for testing is months long, and private evaluations cost more than I make in 2 weeks." Claire looked up, something flickering in her eyes. "I have training in early literacy intervention," she said. "It was part of my specialization." The words hung between them, an unspoken possibility taking shape. "Would you," Mark began, just as his phone buzzed with a text from Mrs. Wilson asking when he'd be back. "I need to get home to my daughter," he said apologetically, gathering his grocery bags. "But maybe, would you be willing to meet again? To talk about possibly helping Lily? I can't pay much, but—" "I don't need payment," Claire interrupted, then smiled faintly. "Well, I do, eventually. But first, I'd just like to meet her. To see if we connect." Mark hesitated only briefly before pulling an old receipt from his pocket and scribbling down his number. "Text me if you want to. No pressure." Claire took the paper, carefully tucking it into her jacket pocket alongside her daughter's photograph. "Thank you," she said. "For stopping. Most people just walk faster when they see someone crying." "I've been the person crying," Mark admitted. "Sometimes all you need is someone to acknowledge that your pain matters." As Mark walked the remaining blocks home, his grocery bags didn't feel quite as heavy. The problems waiting for him hadn't disappeared, but somehow, the simple act of connecting with another human being, of being seen in his struggle and seeing someone else's in return, had lightened his load. 3 days later, Claire texted. They arranged to meet at a small cafe near the park, with Lily in tow. Mark had explained to his daughter only that he'd met someone who used to be a teacher and might be able to help with her reading difficulties. Lily, who had grown increasingly frustrated with school, had agreed with cautious optimism. The cafe was busy when they arrived, but Mark spotted Claire immediately, sitting at a corner table with 3 hot chocolates already waiting. She looked different in daylight, still sad around the eyes, but more composed, her dark hair pulled back neatly, wearing a simple blue sweater that brought out flecks of color in her eyes. "You must be Lily," Claire said warmly as they approached. "Your dad tells me you're having some trouble with reading, but that you're excellent at science." Lily, normally shy around strangers, perked up at the mention of her favorite subject. "I did a project on the life cycle of monarch butterflies," she said. Did my dad show you? He did, Claire smiled. It looked very professional. I'd love to hear more about it. For the next hour, Mark watched in amazement as his normally reserved daughter chatted animatedly with Claire about butterflies, then planets, then her frustrations with reading. Claire listened intently, asking thoughtful questions and sharing stories of her own classroom experiences. When she gently suggested they try a few reading exercises together, Lily agreed without hesitation. The letters get all jumbled, Lily explained as Claire showed her a simple passage of text. And sometimes they move around when I'm trying to read them. Claire nodded understandingly. That happens to a lot of kids, and it doesn't mean you're not smart. In fact, many people with dyslexia are incredibly creative thinkers. Let's try something. She pulled out colored transparent overlays from her bag and placed them over the text. Sometimes changing the contrast helps the letters stay still. Let's see which color works best for you. Mark watched, a lump forming in his throat, as Claire patiently worked with Lily, trying different approaches and celebrating small victories. By the end of their impromptu session, Lily had successfully read an entire paragraph with fewer mistakes than usual. You're a natural teacher, Mark said quietly to Claire as Lily went to the bathroom. Claire's eyes grew distant for a moment. Emma had similar struggles, she admitted. That's why I got the specialized training. I wanted to help her. I'm sorry, Mark said, understanding the pain behind her words. Don't be, Claire replied, her voice steady despite the moisture in her eyes. Helping Lily, it feels like honoring Emma somehow. Like her struggle wasn't for nothing if I can use what I learned to help another child. When Lily returned, she looked hopefully between the adults. Can Miss Claire help me again sometime? Mark glanced at Claire, who nodded. I'd like that very much, Lily, she said. If it's okay with your dad, maybe we could set up regular sessions. We can't pay much, Mark began, but Claire waved him off. Let's start with twice a week, and we'll figure out the details later, she said. Right now, I think we all need this for different reasons. As they left the cafe, Lily skipping ahead, Claire turned to Mark. Thank you, she said softly. For what? He asked, confused. You're the one helping us. For giving me a purpose again, she replied. For reminding me that even though I couldn't save my daughter, I still have something to offer. The words she spoke that day in the cafe, about purpose and moving forward despite loss, became the foundation of their relationship. What began as reading sessions for Lily evolved into dinner invitations, weekend outings, and late-night conversations after Lily had gone to bed. Claire's grief didn't disappear, nor did Mark's struggles as a single parent, but they found in each other an understanding that neither had experienced before. 6 months after their chance encounter in the park, Claire started a small tutoring business, specializing in children with learning differences. Mark helped her build a website in the evenings after work. A year later, when her client list had grown enough to require a dedicated space, Mark used his construction skills to renovate a small storefront into a welcoming learning center. They named it Emma's Butterflies, a tribute to both Claire's daughter and Lily's science project that had first connected them. The journey wasn't without challenges. Claire still had days when grief overwhelmed her, when seeing Lily reach milestones that Emma never would brought fresh waves of pain. Mark still struggled financially, working overtime to make ends meet while trying to be present for his daughter. And Lily, though thriving under Claire's guidance, sometimes worried that Claire would leave them just as her mother had. I'm not trying to replace your mom, Claire told Lily one evening, after the girl had grown unusually quiet following a mother-daughter event at school. No one could ever do that. But you're here, and she's not, Lily said, her voice small. Why would she leave if she loved me? Claire considered her words carefully. Sometimes adults make choices that have nothing to do with the children they leave behind. Your mom's decision wasn't about you not being lovable enough, it was about her own struggles. Do you miss Emma every day? Lily asked suddenly. Claire nodded, tears filling her eyes. Every single day. But being with you and your dad doesn't mean I love her any less. It just means my heart had room to love more people. I think my heart does too, Lily said, leaning against Claire's shoulder. 2 years after that night in the park, Mark proposed to Claire on the same bench where they'd first met. Lily stood nearby, holding a small box containing a butterfly pendant, a gift from her to Claire. You once told me that what I said changed your destiny, Claire reminded him as she accepted both the ring and the pendant. But you changed mine too. You showed me that life could be beautiful again, even after unimaginable loss. Their wedding was small, just family and close friends gathered in the community garden behind Emma's Butterflies Learning Center. Lily served as both flower girl and ring bearer, proudly walking down the makeshift aisle in a dress she had helped design. During the ceremony, they left an empty chair with Emma's photograph, acknowledging that she would always be part of their family story. Some people might think it strange, Claire said during her vows, to build a new beginning on the foundation of such profound losses, a mother who left, a child who died. But I've learned that the deepest love often grows in the most broken places. Mark, who had never been good with words, simply said, "You and Lily taught me that being a family isn't about being perfect. It's about being there, through everything. I promise to be there, always." 5 years after their first meeting, their family had expanded to include a son, whom they named Thomas after Mark's father. The Learning Center had grown into a respected resource for families throughout the community, with Claire leading a small staff of specialized educators. Mark had started his own small construction company, specializing in accessible home modifications for families with special needs children, an idea inspired by a project Claire had mentioned was needed for one of her students. Lily, now 14, had overcome her reading challenges to become an avid reader and writer. She volunteered at the Learning Center after school, working specifically with younger children struggling with dyslexia. On Emma's birthday each year, the family still visited the park bench, leaving flowers and spending time sharing memories of the little girl none of them had known in life but who had, in her absence, brought them together. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if Dad hadn't stopped that night?" Lily asked Claire once as they sat on the bench. Claire looked across the park to where Mark was pushing Thomas on the swings, his laughter carrying through the evening air. "I think about it often," she admitted. "I was in such a dark place. Your dad stopping to talk to me, it was like someone throwing a rope when I was drowning." "What did you say to him?" Lily asked. "He always says you told him something that changed everything, but he never says exactly what it was." Claire smiled, remembering. "I told him that showing up was enough, that being there for you, even when he felt like he was failing, mattered more than he knew." She squeezed Lily's hand. "But the real change came later, when I realized that the same was true for me. That I could honor Emma by continuing to live, to love, to help others." As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the park, Mark joined them on the bench, Thomas sleepily resting his head against his father's shoulder. The family sat together in comfortable silence, watching the day fade into evening. "Thank you," Mark said quietly to Claire, echoing the words he'd spoken to her that first night. "For what?" she asked, though she knew the answer. "For crying on this bench 5 years ago," he said simply. "For being brave enough to share your pain with a stranger. For showing me that sometimes, the most broken paths lead to the most beautiful destinations." As they gathered their things to head home, a young woman sat down on a bench across the park, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs. Claire noticed her first, then touched Mark's arm gently. Without hesitation, Mark handed Thomas to Lily and crossed the park, approaching the crying woman with the same simple question he'd asked Claire years before, "Are you all right?" From a distance, Claire couldn't hear their conversation, but she watched as the woman looked up, startled at first, then gradually relaxing as Mark sat beside her, listening. After a few minutes, he returned to his family, a small smile on his face. "Sometimes all it takes is one person willing to see another's pain," Mark explained as they walked home together. She just lost her job and doesn't know how she'll make rent next month. I gave her the number for that employment program at the community center." Claire nodded, slipping her hand into his. One small act of kindness can ripple outward in ways we never imagine. That night, after the children were asleep, Mark found Claire sitting at the kitchen table, writing in the journal she'd kept since Emma's diagnosis. The pages chronicled her journey from despair to healing, a testament to how far she had come. "What are you writing about tonight?" he asked, setting a cup of tea beside her. "About cycles," Claire said, looking up with eyes that still held sadness but now contained so much more. "About how life takes away, but also gives. About how the woman you met in the park today might someday help someone else because you stopped to help her." Mark sat beside her, their shoulders touching. "I never thought I'd be grateful for the hardest moments of my life," he admitted. "But without them, I wouldn't have become the person who stopped that night. I wouldn't have recognized your pain because I wouldn't have known my own. That's the message I want Lily to understand as she grows up," Claire said. "That our hardest experiences can become our greatest strengths if we let them." As the years passed, their blended family weathered new storms: Thomas's asthma diagnosis that brought back painful memories for Claire, Mark's mother's declining health, Lily's teenage struggles with identity and belonging. But the foundation they had built proved strong enough to withstand each challenge. On the 10th anniversary of their first meeting, the family returned to the park bench, now bearing a small plaque dedicated to Emma. The Learning Center had expanded to 3 locations across the city, becoming a haven for children who learned differently and families navigating loss. Mark's construction company specialized in creating spaces for special needs children, often partnering with Claire's centers to design optimal learning environments. Lily, now 19 and studying psychology in college, had started a support group for young adults who had experienced parental abandonment. Thomas, at 8, was already showing signs of his father's practical nature and his mother's compassionate heart, often sitting with the newest, most nervous children at the learning centers until they felt comfortable. "Did you ever imagine this life?" Mark asked Claire as they watched their children placing flowers beneath Emma's plaque. Claire shook her head. "When you found me that night, I couldn't imagine surviving another day, let alone building this." She gestured to their family, to the life they had created together. "I was so focused on what I'd lost that I couldn't see what might still be waiting." "What changed?" Mark asked, though they had discussed this many times over the years. "You reminded me that pain isn't the end of the story," Claire said simply. "You and Lily showed me that love doesn't run out when tragedy strikes, it just finds new channels to flow through." That evening, they hosted a gathering at their home, a tradition they had started 5 years earlier. The guests included families from the learning centers, colleagues, friends, and most importantly, people who had faced similar losses and struggles. What had begun as a small support group had evolved into a community of healing, with the Jenkins family at its heart. During these gatherings, they always set aside time for what they called bench moments, opportunities for people to share how unexpected encounters had changed their lives. The name, of course, came from Mark and Claire's own story. "I never planned to speak publicly about Emma's death," Claire told the gathered group that night. "I thought keeping her memory private was the only way to honor her. But sharing her story, and hearing yours, has shown me that our deepest wounds, when open to the light, can become doorways for connection." A young father spoke next, describing how Claire's tutoring had not only helped his son overcome learning challenges but had given him, as a parent, the confidence to advocate for his child. A teenage girl shared how Lily's support group had helped her understand that her mother's abandonment wasn't her fault. An elderly woman explained how one of Mark's home modifications had allowed her grandson with cerebral palsy to navigate their home independently for the first time. Story after story unfolded, each one a testament to how pain, when transformed rather than buried, could become purpose. Later that night, after the guests had gone and the children were asleep, Mark found Claire standing in the backyard, looking up at the stars. He wrapped his arms around her from behind, and they stood in comfortable silence. "Emma would be 18 today," Claire said softly. Sometimes I try to imagine what she would be like now, what she would want to be when she grew up. She would be proud of you, Mark said, his voice certain. Of how you've carried her with you, of how you've helped so many children because of what you learned through loving her. Claire turned in his arms, resting her head against his chest. The most surprising thing about grief, she said, is not how it changes you, but how it connects you to others. Before Emma died, I thought suffering isolated you. Now I know it's what makes us most human, most able to recognize each other. Mark nodded, thinking of the man he had been before meeting Claire, functioning but hollow, going through the motions of parenting without truly believing in himself. We heal each other, he said simply. As they prepared for bed that night, Claire paused at their bedroom window, looking out at the neighborhood where their story had begun. The park was visible in the distance, the bench where she had sat crying now a symbol of how life could change in an instant, sometimes for the worse, but sometimes, miraculously, for the better. You know, she said thoughtfully, people often talk about destiny as if it's predetermined, something that happens to you rather than something you create. And what do you think? Mark asked, joining her at the window. I think destiny is made in moments of choice, she replied. When you chose to stop that night instead of walking by. When I chose to text you 3 days later instead of hiding in my grief. When Lily chose to trust me despite having been abandoned before. Mark considered this, remembering all the small decisions that had led them here, decisions made in pain, in hope, in uncertainty, but always with an openness to possibility. Maybe that's the real lesson in all of this, he said. That even in our darkest moments, we still have the power to choose connection over isolation, growth over stagnation, love over fear. Claire turned from the window, taking his hands in hers. That night in the park, I told you that showing up was enough, that being present for Lily mattered more than you knew. But I've realized over the years that it's more than just showing up. It's about showing up with your heart open, even when it's been broken. Especially when it's been broken, Mark added. As they drifted to sleep that night, Claire thought about the woman Mark had spoken to in the park earlier that day, another soul at a crossroads, another life that might be changed by a simple act of kindness. She wondered where that woman would be in 10 years, what story she might tell about the day a stranger stopped to ask if she was all right. The next morning, Claire woke early and slipped out of bed, careful not to wake Mark. She made her way to the small desk in their bedroom where she kept her journal. Opening to a fresh page, she began to write. To anyone who finds themselves sitting alone on a park bench, tears falling, heart breaking, this story is for you. 10 years ago, I was you. I couldn't see beyond my pain, couldn't imagine that anything good could ever grow from such devastating loss. But a stranger stopped, and in that simple act of human connection, a new path opened before me. I don't know what brought you to your bench. I don't know what pain you carry. But I do know this, your story isn't over. The chapter you're living now, the one that feels unbearable, is not the final word on your life. There are people you haven't met yet who will need exactly what your broken heart has learned. There are joys you cannot imagine waiting on the other side of this darkness. The woman I was 10 years ago wouldn't have believed this possible. But the woman I am today, wife, mother, teacher, survivor, stands as living proof that destiny isn't something that happens to you. It's something you build, one choice at a time, even when those choices are made through tears. So if you're reading this and recognizing yourself in my words, know that I'm reaching across time to sit beside you on that bench. To tell you that you are not alone. That this moment of despair, however defining it feels, is just one moment in a longer story. And that sometimes, the most beautiful chapters begin exactly where you think the story has ended. Claire closed her journal and went to wake her family, carrying within her the certainty that somewhere, someone else was sitting on a bench, waiting for their life to change. And somewhere else, someone was pausing, choosing to stop rather than walk by. In that space between despair and compassion, destinies were being rewritten, just as hers had been. As she helped Thomas tie his shoes and listened to Lily's excited chatter about her upcoming psychology exam, as she caught Mark's eye across the kitchen and saw in his smile the reflection of their shared journey, Claire understood the truth that had been revealed to her over these 10 years, that our deepest wounds can become our greatest gifts, not despite the pain they cause but because of it. That in our broken places, light enters. And that sometimes, a single conversation between strangers can alter the course of many lives, creating ripples of healing that extend far beyond what either person could imagine in that moment. This was the legacy of that night in the park, not just their family, not just the learning centers or support groups, but the countless invisible connections that had formed because two people in pain had chosen to see each other, to listen, to remain open to the possibility that even in their darkest hour, something beautiful was waiting to be born. If this story has touched your heart, please like this video and subscribe to our channel for more stories of hope, healing, and unexpected connections. Remember that your own story has the power to inspire others, and that sometimes, the most meaningful encounters happen when we're brave enough to stop and ask a simple question: are you all right? Because in that question lies the recognition of our shared humanity, the acknowledgement that we all struggle, we all suffer, and we all need each other to find our way through the darkness and into the light. And that, perhaps, is the most important destiny of all.